tactics suddenly. I am a poor woman who cannot afford to pay the prices you expect from the chief. Come, dear Tinito, give me the melon for 2 francs. The Chinaman shrugged his shoulders and glanced at me. The glint in his narrow eye might have meant, "Ah, these women, what's the use?" He sighed for a moment, while Tinito looked at him pleadingly. He was silent. "Take the melon," he said, "and give me 2 francs. I must be on my way. But do not think you have deceived me, cunning woman. I know that you are not poor, for only yesterday your brother sold the copra from your land." Without a sign of embarrassment the girl opened her hand and held up a 100-franc note. "Ah, you are rich," remarked the Chinaman as he undid an oilcloth wallet and stripped the change from a substantial roll of bills. "I knew it. Are you not ashamed to practice such deceit?" But Tehinatu only tucked the melon under her arm with a triumphant smile. It is a curious study to watch the contact of Chinese and Polynesian races separated by the most profound of gulfs, yet possessing the meeting ground of a common love of bargaining. All through the French islands you will find Chinamen, scattered singularly or in little groups, through the windward and leeward societies, the Marquesas, among the distant atolls of the Pompano, in the remote Gimbalas, in Tupuai, Raitarua, and lonely Raimatara. They are keepers of small stores, for the most part, where you may see them interrupted at their eternal task of copra-making to exchange a box of matches for a single coconut, or to haggle for a quarter of an hour over a matter of 5 sous. Patient, painstaking, and unobtrusive, existing in inconceivable squalor, without the common pleasures which enable most of us to tolerate our lives. They seem to be impelled by motives far more profound than the longing for material gain, by a species of idealism equally incomprehensible to the native and to the visitor of European race. It is not beyond possibility that in the course of a few more generations it will be the native islander who lingers here and there, isolated in communities principally Chinese, for the islanders, superb physically, are the least prolific of men, while the weedy little Tinito, who brings his own women with him, or succeeds with his own peculiar knack in obtaining women from a population which regards him with amused contempt, surrounds himself with children in as short a time as nature allows. I have sometimes thought that the secret of the Chinaman's dogged and self-denying labors might lie here, traceable to his cult of ancestor worship. To become a revered ancestor one must have children, and in order to bring up properly a large family of children one must spend one's life in unceasing toil. I doubt that Europeans in large numbers will ever be tempted to make the islands their home. The life is too alien, the change too great. As things are, the relation of Polynesian and Chinese amounts to a subtle contest for the land, a struggle of which both parties are aware. The native, incapable of abstract thought, feels and resents it vaguely. To the Chinaman, whose days are spent in meditation, undisturbed by the automatic labors of his body, the issue is no doubt clear-cut. The native is by far the more attractive of the two, clean, kindly, selfish, jolly, childish, well-bred, and pleasing to the eye. But the Chinaman possesses the less attractive qualities which make for the survival of a race: the industry, the unselfishness, the capacity to live for an idea, and in the end, if only by force of numbers, he will win. Looking into the future, one can see the eastern islands populated by Chinese, as our own islands of Hawaii have been populated with immigrants from Japan. They are dying anyway, and they won't work. The commercial gentleman will tell you, here is rich cane land, needing only labor to produce bountifully, and the world needs sugar. Perhaps this view is correct. For myself, I feel that the question is debatable. There are certain parts of the world, like our American mountains, deserts, and lonely stretches of coast, which seem planned for the spiritual refreshment of mankind, places from which one carries away a new serenity and the sense of a yearning for beauty satisfied. Ever since the days of Cook, the islands of the South Sea have charmed the white man, explorers, naturalists, traders, and the rough crews of whaling vessels. The strange beauty of these little islands, insignificant so far as commercial exploitation is concerned, seems worthy of preservation. and the native paddling his outlandish canoe or lounging in picturesque attitudes before his house is indispensable to the scene. If the day comes when his canoe lies rotting on the beach and his house is tenanted by industrious Chinese, though the same jagged peaks rise against the sky and the same seas thunders lazily along the reef, when the anchor drops and the call comes to go ashore, I, for one, shall hesitate. In the Cook group, 600 miles west of Tahiti, the prospect is less depressing, for the British have adopted a policy of exclusion and made it impossible for the native to sell his land. The Cook Islander, reinforced here and there with a dash of white blood, and undiscouraged by a competition he is not fitted to meet, seems to be holding his own. The reason is clear. The native has been little tampered with, left in possession of his land, and protected rigidly against epidemics like the influenza of 1918, which ravaged the island populations wherever infected vessels were permitted to touch. Imported disease, exploitation of the land, and coolie immigration, these are the destroying forces from which the native must be preserved if a shadow of the old charm is to linger for the enjoyment of future generations of travelers. Following Tehino toward the house, I thought to myself how wonderfully the island charm had been preserved here on the peninsula of Taperu. We were within 50 miles of Papeete, where business is carried on, and steamers call, and perspiring tourists walk briskly about the streets. Yet here, in this lonely settlement by the lagoon, civilization seemed half a world away. When I walked abroad, the sight of a white man brought the people to their doors, and bands of children followed me, staring and bright-eyed with interest. On the veranda children surrounded us while the girl cut and distributed thin slices of her melon. There was a fascination in watching these youngsters, brought up without clothes and without restraint, in an environment nearly as friendly as that of the original human pair. Once they were weaned from their mother's breast, which often does not occur until they have reached the age of 2.5 or 3, the children of the islands are left practically to shift for themselves. There is food in the house, a place to sleep, and a scrap of clothing if the weather be cool. That is the extent of parental responsibility. The child eats when it pleases, sleeps when and where it will amuse itself, with no other resources than its own. As it grows older, certain light duties are expected of it: gathering fruit, lending a hand with fishing, cleaning the ground about the house, but the command to work is casually given and as casually obeyed. Punishment is scarcely known. Yet under a system which would ruin forever an American or English child, the brown youngster flourishes with astonishingly little friction. Sweet-tempered, cheerful, never bored, and seldom quarrelsome, the small boy tugs at the net or gathers bait for the fisherman, seemingly without a thought of drudgery. The small girl tends her smaller sister in the spirit of playing with a doll. Perhaps the restless and aggressive spirit which makes discipline necessary in bringing up our own children is the very quality that has made the white race master of the world. Perhaps the more hostile surroundings of civilization have made necessary the enforcement of prohibitory laws. I filled my pipe and lay smoking on a mat, with an eye on the youngsters at their play. For the time being, a little girl at the most attractive period of childhood was the center of interest. One of her front teeth was loose. She had tied a bit of bark to it, and was summoning up courage for a determined pull. A boy stole up behind her, reached over her shoulder, and gave the merciful jerk. Next moment he was dancing around her, waving the strip of bark to which the tooth was still attached. The owner of the tooth began to sob, holding a hand over her mouth. But her lamentations ceased when a larger boy shouted seriously, "Give her the tooth, and let her speak to the rat." The small girl trotted to the edge of the bush, where I heard her repeat a brief invocation before she flung the tooth into a thicket of hibiscus. I knew what she was saying, for I had made inquiries concerning this children's custom, probably as old as it is quaint. It is a sort of exchange. The baby tooth is thrown among the bushes, and the rat is invoked to replace it with one as white and durable as his own. The child says, thy tooth, O rat, give